Hello and welcome on another fine Tuesday. I'm back from vacation, Lake of the Ozarks, very beautiful, really remarkable. This twisty lake with all these fingers in Missouri, and they say that because it just has so many little outcroppings, it has more shoreline than the state of California. Quite something. Very nice time. I hope you had a good vacation away from me, but now I'm back, and it is exciting. Another Tuesday Tea-ology, and exciting on the tea account because we have today, at long last, another battle of the Earl Greys, Earl's Grey, whatever the case may be. Two of our champions have not been able to meet in the tea arena because I ran out of Whittard, Earl Grey. But I have more. In fact, more than just that. I splurged on the Tea Discovery Collection, but it includes the Earl Grey, which is their number 33, the quintessential British blend, beautifully balanced with flavors of bergamot. So in the right corner, the Whittard Earl Grey. Smells good. And in the left, the other reigning champion, the Rishi Botanicals. Oh, great. Here for an unbiased challenge. I am not sponsored by anybody. You can tell from the quality of my production. And so you will get an unbiased review. Nothing to decide between them on the smell test. Both doing good. Gonna let them brew a minute. Let them cool. We'll turn ourselves to the more important matter of the theology, and then we'll bring in the tea. And we have been just getting into the doctrine of creation after a little while of a tour to scratch the surface of the doctrine of God, and now turning to the works of God, what God has done in history. And it begins with God beginning history, that the universe is basically divided into two categories, profoundly unequal categories. One category, the supreme and incomparable category, would be God, and the other category would be everything else, everything not God. And everything not God is made by God. And so the doctrine of creation is that God began and set in motion everything that is not Him. And so the story of history is the story of God's world that God has made and what has unfolded in that world. And so for the doctrine of creation, we begin at the beginning. That is what the scriptures begin with. The beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Heavens and the earth, with clearly special focus upon this world and the creatures that live upon it, and especially mankind. But it is an inclusive statement. It is cosmic in its nature. And here in the beginning, it does not outright say, but I think we can find in there this sense that even the dimensions in which our world exists are God's creatures. That really everything as we experience it, that there is this beginning in which God created. And it is really impossible for us to get our head around these concepts. We talked about this in terms of God's eternity and God's omnipresence and whatnot, that you understand what time and space are until you really try to think about them. And you really can't get your head around the idea of unending space, nor can you get your head around the idea of bounded space, because then immediately your mind says, on what's on the outside. Same thing with time. The concept of eternity past is incomprehensible to us. It's paradoxical. It's logically, time ceases to have meaning. But the concept of time having a beginning, we immediately want to ask what came before it. And so it It is best to suggest that these dimensions, time and space, are created by God, but that we only sort of know what we're saying when we talk about beginning of time, the boundaries of space, or the laying out of the dimensions of space. Our minds, being finite, simply are not capable of grasping some of these concepts. But God created. Uh, God made everything that is not him, and so God is at the center of it. And and as the doctrine of creation unfolds, we want to always bear in mind that it is God's creation, that God is the agent of creation, and that God is creating it in accordance with who he is. Creation is different from God. Creation is not God. But creation is God's creature. And so God's character is going to be visible in the act of creation and the world that God has made. And that is why the world is substantially the way it is. We always want to remember, too, that Christianity has a doctrine of the fall, and that explains why there is bad in the world, why things are not perfect in the world, is because of the doctrine of the fall. So the doctrine of creation, if we didn't have a doctrine of the fall, that would not square with reality, because you'd say, okay, you claim there's this good God, but I look out and I see a lot of bad in the world. Well, we have a doctrine of the fall, too, and you need both together to get a complete picture of the way the world is. But the doctrine of creation explains all of the goodness in the world, explains the way the world was meant to be, and the way the creation is heading in the recreation that God is going to bring about. So bear in mind the character of God, that God who was already in the beginning. Again, we're dealing with, now we come up against matters of time that are incomprehensible to us, but God who exists before the beginning. He needs nothing. He is perfectly sufficient in himself. God did not create out of need. He is not dependent upon this creation. And that means that it is the work of his superabundant, outflowing love and character. His love is going to be visible in creation, and it is. His love is everywhere visible in creation. And further, God had perfect fellowship in his own triune existence. And so relationality is going to characterize creation. Not just the physical relationality of objects to objects and whatnot, but that at some point God brings into creation a higher relationality, not only animal life, but supremely, of course, mankind made in God's image and likeness. And of course, what that all gets to will come to in the future. So we have God's character at work in what God has made. And this is good because it assures us that we have a sensible world. And you may not often think about that. To most people, the idea that the world is real and rational is intuitive. It's intuitive probably to everybody. And most people give it very little, if any, further thought than that, because you don't need to for your daily life. The world is real. It is objective. It is outside of me, and I'm interacting with it. The world is rational. When I pick up a book, it's not suddenly going to become a fish, or my hand is not suddenly going to disappear for no particular reason and reappear as a tentacle. Do you see? There could be all kinds of madness in the world, but the world is rational. It is surprising oftentimes. It is not always predictable because there are many, many factors at work, but nonetheless, the world is real and rational. And that is something that we know intuitively and that most people accept because that's how you go about your ordinary life. We couldn't. You couldn't make the plans we do, go to work, do your work, go to a restaurant and eat dinner and stuff without understanding that the world is real and rational. The only people who raise questions about this are some who are more philosophically minded. And I'm not trying to bring a downer on that. I'm very interested in philosophy myself, armchair philosophy, as it were. Uh, but it's only people who get into speculating, really, that unfortunately some get beyond just asking, "How do I know the world is real and rational?" And, a person could begin to talk oneself out of it, but you can only talk yourself out of it so far. And sometimes, perhaps, we talk ourselves out of things because we don't want to obey. We don't want to submit ourselves to the reality and rationality of the world. And so we rationalize away the rationality of the world because what we want is to reshape things according to our desires. Or we just get caught up in this tangle of our minds and ask, how do I know that everything is real? How do I know that I'm real? There's a real philosophical conundrum. I remember a professor of philosophy telling me he was talking about another professor of philosophy and that this professor's student. All right, try to follow me. And he said, I think the question was that this philosophy student had asked, how do I know that I'm real? And the professor, something like, kind of looked over his glasses and said, who who should I say is asking? Who's asking the question there? And the sort of point that my professor was trying to make is, if you seriously question your reality, there's maybe something psychological going on there. But we hypothetically ask these questions. But the doctrine of creation provides a sound answer for these questions. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There is a real world that we really can interact with. It is outside of ourselves. And because God is loving, it is a good world. Because God is wise, it is a wonderful, orderly, beautiful world. It is a sensible world, a rational world. It is a world that is suited for creatures to flourish in. There's one thing to be thankful for that you probably hadn't even been thinking to be thankful for today. Be thankful that you exist in a real and rational world, that the world around you is not mad. You read the news and the world may seem to be going mad. Well, the world is fallen, but the world is good. And the good God who made the world has put into action a plan to redeem the world. And so even from the doctrine of creation, even from these beginning things where we think about things we don't usually think about, and the order of the world that God created, that invites us then to look at the disorder within the ordered world right now and to be reminded of the gospel. The good God who made the world is so good and loving that he sent his own son to die a sacrifice for our sins, to redeem us. And we can even now enjoy the first fruits of salvation. We can even now enjoy the forgiveness and life that God gives. And we can look forward to a day when he is going to finish his work and when this disordered world will be put right, when things will be once again as God intended, a new heavens and a new earth that will endure forever in the wonder of God's eternity. Well, there is your theology for this Tuesday, and now we have just a minute or so to return to the tea. Let the newcomer, the Whittard, go first. Mm, that's good. That's strong. It's very flavorful, robust. I can see why it was a contender early on. That's going to be hard to beat. It's going to be hard to beat. Now, a little water to cleanse the palate. And now the Rishi, the sort of more reigning champion because I have more of them available. It's difficult. Mm. The Whittard takes it. Provisional. It's only one test. Maybe they'll have a rematch at some future point. For now, Whittard of Chelsea, folks, makes a fine Earl Grey. Rishi Botanicals, very excellent as well. Close match, but I'm giving it to the Whittard. Well, you enjoy your tea. Enjoy your day. May the Lord bless you and care for you in every way.